Episode 3 explores what beauty means in Eddie's art, the motivation that keeps him coming back to the studio, and the interplay of painter and writer within him.
You know, you mentioned something just now about looking pretty. What does beauty mean to you when it comes to work? Or is it something you reach for? Is it something you try to avoid? Or is that something that has changed over time?
It changes with each painting.
Right.
It evolves. It develops. I'm looking for a new standard of beauty within my own mind most of the time. I think there's the external world which is full of beauty, but in your mind, it's like, I'm not. It's like, kind of like a quantum space. It's fluid. It's not static. I remember when I came back to Trinidad, I think the word is astounded by how beautiful our people really are. People could say, well, I don't like white girls. You could come to Trinidad, you might have to think twice about that. You might not like black women. You could come to Trinidad, you might have to think twice, 3 times about that, because I used to say to my pal Steve, I said, Steve, in England, you ain't seen a beautiful girl for like 6 months. Everybody close up and it's cold and everything. I say, you could be walking down the road and you turn the corner and you could be walking downtown for an hour going about your business, and you will see 10 different women who are just catch you by surprise.
Right.
I say, in England, you're not seeing that. You're not seeing that mix. You're not seeing that variety. You're not hearing it. This is not a segregated society. I used to say, well, colonialism here is bunk, because everybody's been fucking everybody else for 400 years. So the mixing has been going on for a long time, and there's this effervescence, if you like, in how the good Lord has constructed people, and so for me, when I'm painting, I'm aware of this when I'm making my work. I'm not holding myself to one standard of beauty. I think that's quite dangerous and perhaps a little myopic. I'm looking for the surprise. Like I say, I'm walking down the road saying, Jesus Christ, where did you come from, And it's not just, as a hetero man, you just, it could be the male figure as well. You think, good looking fella,
Right.
And, and then even a very ugly fella is beautiful.
Yeah, they have something.
And then, you can't help but notice how our environment and our history has shaped people, the Caribbean female, for example, is smaller on top and bigger on the bottom, it's not a standard, but it's fairly applicable.
Yeah.
But there are infinite variations in that. If you're looking for it and if you're aware of it, if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it.
Right.
But that's my job, to look for it. I'm looking for that. I'm looking for what's beautiful. I'm not even fascinated by it. I'm just looking for it, because what else am I going to look for? Give us something better to look for, no?
But you say that as interesting. I mean, this actually is not in my script, but you say that a lot of your work is, I find the human form incidental. It's about, to use your word, the landscape. The human form happens to exist in a landscape, and there's a human form. You know, how is that a conscious thing? I mean, how has that evolved or developed?
How do you mean? Explain yourself a little more.
No, I mean, so for instance, you talk about looking for beauty and so on, but a lot of your work is very, as I said, the human form, that beauty is not very present.
No.
In a lot of your work.
Right. I'm fascinated as well by the manipulation of the material. It's a privilege of being an artist that you get to muck around with material for its own sake.
You get to write the story.
You get to write the story. You get to play with it. You know, like a child, you know, getting some plastic, you know, be at it all day, you know, playing with it, you know, go play with some mud, you know, and that's what kids do. And they're not looking for anything. They're just kind of like using this and using this to make form. And I think it's very easy to forget that. And painting is really difficult. It's really difficult because it's forever flat, and it's about flatness and about space at the same time. So it's about a contradiction all the time. That fascinates me. And manipulating the material so that it begins to talk back to you in a certain kind of way instead of you ordering it.
Okay.
Because it's easy to order it.
Right.
You know, you can get the color wheel and you can say, oh, red and blue, just give you purple, and white and brown, just give you a kind of like a beige or whatever, you know. And it's very easy to sort of, well, it's not easy, but you can get used to those formulas. As you've probably seen, people make work by formula. You know, they make the same painting or the same, and I get bored easily. I get bored really easily. And I tend to sort of put my mind more into sort of long-term projects that will allow that flexibility to happen. It's a relationship.
Right.
You know, it's a relationship with flatness, which is another contradiction in terms, because the world is not flat.
No.
You know, but so you're constantly flattening what's in your head, you know, it comes to the surface, and it's what's in your mind is a very active kind of like fluid thing, and then it has to go through the material and your process, and then it's fucking flat. You can't get away from it. You can impasto it, you can decide to get, you know, like many artists give up painting because it's easier to, not easier, but the three-dimensionality of installation and all that kind of thing is more seductive. Going flat, bust your brain. I suppose I like my brain to be busted, huh? I did a workshop with Charlotte Elias up at Grand Riviere 20 years ago. She did some work, a couple of big workshops up there, and I did some installation, which I enjoyed tremendously. Yeah, a huge, big thing. I designed and built this house. This is an installation. That house behind you there, this whole site is an installation. But for me, it's a practical one. I live in it. I get some money from it. I can indulge certain kinds of ideas, you know, eco. This is an eco site. I forget the question, actually. What was the question?
The question there was, you know, now you make me forget the question.
Maybe we should move on.
Hold on. So you're in this business for a long time. After these decades of painting and experimenting, what continues to excite you or surprise you when you enter the studio?
I still got some paintings to what one painting that's in my mind, or one image that's in my mind, is when they put Christ in the tomb after they took him down off the cross, and it's Nicodemus's place, the tomb, and they said Martha, one of the women come and they anoint his body and everything. Now they were, Jesus apparently was part of the Essenic tradition, part of the Essenes. The Essenes were the healers, the Jewish healers. They were the ones who resisted the Romans up at Masada and so on. Bad fellas. Jesus was obviously a high man in Essene, and he wasn't dead. Yeah, that was one of the stories. On the more esoteric kind of leanings, he wasn't actually dead. That he was able to control like a yogi. Mm-hmm. And there's this big stories about Jesus going to India and all this kind of thing, which is, in my mind, quite believable as a young ascetic. He would have moved around. The ancient world was not as closed as people say. So he was probably well-traveled and extremely well-educated in those sciences. And the image in my mind is what happens when he got up and he's in this dark tomb, he knows what's going on. What would you, it's like get up in the morning, and you got a tough day ahead, and you just sit there on the edge of the bed and you think, fuck, this is a tough day, So what was going through his mind, because he was all human, when he got up off that slab, and, did the Shroud of Turin come from that time? All these, and I'm just thinking what a fascinating images would be to see this solitary figure getting up in this, basically a cave, and he's just been through this incredible worldly experience, and he knows that he was a messenger, and this put him up on a cross and they drive some nail through his hands. It's survivable. People have been shot 10 times. Right. People have survived all sorts of horror. The yogi man who taught me could bring his heart rate down to 5 beats a minute.
Wow.
So I wonder what that image would be. You wake up and you think, okay, well, what do we do now? What's really the story now? Because the stories about that post-crucifixion time with Jesus and his family, and that stretches across to France, to India, to the Knight Templar. It's a very complicated network and thread that is believable and unbelievable. All of which I find extremely exciting.
So one day we will see something of that.
There's a part of my work, a lot of my images come out kind of dark, heavy dark, but it's not that is not really about darkness. It's just about atmosphere, the moment, and I figure that might be perhaps an even more critical moment than him getting nailed up on a cross, because why did he get up? Where are you going? And the whole idea about him kind of ascending into heaven is all very UFO-like and shit like that, but we're not going to go there, because the other story is that he just disappeared and went back. He went to India. There's a village in northern India that's got a shrine and a tomb where Isa is buried, and he was revered as a yogi, a Westerner. It's a real place. And that tradition of asceticism, death, is ultimately fascinating. I'm not a morose kind of fella. But that's one image that's in my mind that I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking that to make that painting, I should really get a whole stack of paper and try and draw it. Because a long time I haven't really done that kind of work where I take the human figure and alter it 100 different ways, you know, and in a theme. I don't like themes. There's another painting which is a kind of it has to be a fairly big one. It's about the 1%. And equally, that's another rabbit hole. That's a big, nasty rabbit hole. One of the boys I went to school with in England was head of the MI6, MI5, yeah. He was the last one.
Wow.
And I remember when he got appointed, all of us, we were still in touch. They said, fuck. The word went around very quickly. He said, yeah, we always knew you that was going to, because he was always like that, you know, and he's not cold-hearted, but he is. To do that work, you had to be like Iceman.
Right.
And so I remember having a chat with one or two of the fellows who knew him, we all knew each other, you know. I used to open the batting with him at under 18. And I said, the amount of shit that will come across that bitch's desk every fucking day. I said, I make your toes curl. You know, that's like unimaginable crap.
Yeah.
All kind of agent and all kind of fucking, you know, intrigue, and you know, it's like one of them novels, one of them big fat novels. I mean, right. Squared.
But in reality.
Yeah, in real, you know.
Real.
Yeah, and I thought, wow, look at that. Look what he's dealing with, you know.
So you knew a real life James Bond.
Well, he probably does. He was ambassador to Vietnam for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, on his road up.
Right.
He's a very humble guy. But so I'm fascinated by those kinds of not conspiracies, because I think we live in conspiracy anyway. We are told that those things are conspiracies, but in truth, it's another level of truth that we cannot, as normal citizens, cannot engage in. So, you know, it seems like it's a myth, but it's probably, a lot of it is perhaps quite true, except we're not there. We're nowhere near that shit.
And your mission would be to convey that into a flat surface.
Not mission. It's a kind of secrecy. And I'd like to make a painting about that kind of secrecy, that kind of human, that you know, people keep secrets, you know. So it's not really about all of that. It's about that extreme privacy.
That's intriguing. How do you represent a concept like secrecy on a flat surface?
That's why it's got me there. And that's a bit like Christ waking up in the tomb, you know. It's like a very secret moment. But what's next?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he comes out into the light, you know. I mean, it's all very symbolic. And in that other world of conspiracies, there's a lot of symbol systems going on, because it's another language that is happening that we are not party to, you know. If most of us were party to that level of, I mean, we're talking about corruption, you know, like everybody's corrupt. But that level of corruption, man, must be, I mean, beautiful, you know what I mean? It's just,
I would certainly love to see that painting.
Me too. That's got me that's really got me.
Nice.
There's other things too, huh? There's other images. But I realized that most of those will become morphed into all the other work. So if I'm talking about secrecy, that painting is called The Hunter. It's a big dark painting. It's a man in the bush with a creature. It's a secret moment. You know, I've been in the bush in my work, and it's secret. You know, Leroy used to talk about the bush, and he used to talk about a certain kind of terror. And he was a big influence with me, actually.
Okay.
Not because of his work, but because of his incredible concentration. Man has a superhuman concentration, you know, and a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
And he wasn't complaining. People think he was talking about blackness. He wasn't. He was talking about painting. He just happened to be black.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can't kind of like deny that, you know. So, you know, that's part of the affirmation of his nowness.
It's nowness. You know, I was thinking, when I see your work, I think artist. But when I hear you speak, I think writer. Do these parts of you come from the same place, or are they speaking different truths in a different language or in different languages?
When I was teaching, I used to tell my students that image making and writing are the two sides of a coin. And you got this thin edge. But it's one piece. Mm-hmm. There's two languages going on. And one is visual, and one is writing. It's called words, you know? And writing is ABC to Z for us in the English language, and writing also includes 0 to 9, 1, that system. It's a symbolic system. All our communication is funneled through these two methods, which is got incredible flexibility but also limitations. That's why the other side of the coin exists. So we are also creating a text. Forgive me, I've just strayed completely from the question.
No, you haven't.
What was the question again?
The question was, you know,
where do they?
where are they coming from different places, the same place?
No, I think as a source, they must spring from the same place. Mm-hmm. And that same place also dictates what a dancer does. It also dictates what a great architect would do. It's that place where you're allowed to totally play with the ABC 0 to 9, or you're allowed to totally play with the idea of form, because ABC and 0 to 9 creates form, because it communicates about the world, so you're reflecting on the world, but you need a language to translate it. Otherwise, we would be mute.
Right.
And the expression of it allows us to understand it more, instead of being like innocent and part of it. There will be no separation from us and the environment, and that's what language does. It separates us from the environment. Mm-hmm. So I never wanted to be a writer, but I love to write. I have written millions of words and burnt all of it.
Wow.
I write every day, either a list or sometimes, see them pads of paper over there? I buy those habitually and just write shit down every day. Instead of like people say, you know, got a computer, it's already there. I don't need a fucking computer, it's already there. What I need is a pen and a piece of paper. It's very efficient. It's more efficient than a laptop or a phone, because you have to turn that shit on. And you got to protect it in a certain kind of way. But a piece of paper will last 100 years. Your phone ain't going to last that long.
True.
So as a method, and a very simple method of inscribing the world, it's extremely important because it's the substrate of what I do.
Okay.
And what most artists do. And it's an abstraction of reality. Because if I give you a tube of red paint, it's a pretty meaningless object. And then I give you the next day a yellow, and then something happens. And then the next day I give you another 2 colors. And the next thing you got the possibility of language. you don't have one letter.
Right.
You are parts of a larger alphabet, and then it starts to make sense.